As a fitting climax to this chapter, I wish to introduce one of the most unusual persons I have ever known. I first saw him 24 years ago, a few minutes after he was born. He came into the world without any physical sign of fears, and the doctor admitted, when pressed for an opinion, that the child might be deaf and mute for life. I challenged the doctor's opinion. I had the right to do so. I was the child's father. I, too, reached a decision and rendered an opinion, but I expressed the opinion silently, in the secrecy of my own heart. I decided that my son would hear and speak. Nature could send me a child without ears, but nature could not induce me to accept the reality of the affliction. In my own mind, I knew that my son would hear and speak. How I wash it, there must be a way, and I knew I would find it. I thought of the words, oft immortal, Emerson, the whole course of things goes to teach us faith, one need only obey. There is guidance for each of us, and by lowly listening, we shall hear third word, the right word, desire. More than anything else, I desired that my son should not be a deaf mute. From that desire, I never receded, not for a second. Many years previously, I had written, our only limitations are those we set up in our own minds. For the first time, I wondered if that statement were true. Lying on the bed in front of me was a newly born child, without the natural equipment of hearing. Even though he might hear and speak, he was obviously disfigured for life. Surely, this was a limitation which that child had not set up in his own mind. What could I do about it? Somehow, I would find a way to transplant into that child's mind my own burning desire for ways and means of conveying Zen to his brain without the aid of ears. As soon as the child was old enough to cooperate, I would fill his mind so completely with a burning desire to hear that nature would, by methods, offer, own, translated into physical reality. All this thinking took place in my own mind, but I spoke of it to no one. Every day I renewed the pledge I had made to myself, not to accept a deaf mute for a son. As he grew older and began to take notice of things around him, we observed that he had a slight degree of hearing. When he reached the age when children usually begin talking, he made no attempt to speak, but we could tell by his actions that he could hear certain sounds slightly. That was all I wanted. Talk no. I was convinced that if he could hear, even slightly, he might develop still greater hearing capacity. Then something happened, which gave me hope. It came from an entirely unexpected source. We bought a Victrola. When the child heard the music for the first time, he went into ecstasies and promptly appropriated the machine. He soon showed a preference for certain records. Among them, It's a Long Way to Tipperary. On any occasion, he played that piece over and over for almost 2 hours, standing in front of the Victrola with his teeth clamped on the edge of the case. The significance of this self-formed habit of his did not become clear to us until years afterward, for we had never heard of the principle of bone conduction of sound at that time. Shortly after he appropriated the Victrola, I discovered that he could harm quite clearly when I spoke with my lips, touching his mastoid bone, or at the base of the brain. These discoveries placed in my possession the necessary media bay, which I began to translate into reality, my burning desire to help my son develop hearing and speech. By that time he was making stabs at speaking certain words. The outlook was far from encouraging, but desire backed by faith knows no such word as impossible. Having determined that he could hear the sound of my voice plainly, he began immediately to transfer to his mind the desire to hear and speak. I soon discovered that the child enjoyed bedtime stories, so I went to work, creating stories designed to develop in him self-reliance, imagination, and a keen desire to hear and to be normal. There was one story in particular which I emphasized by giving it some new and dramatic coloring each time it was told. It was designed to plant in his mind the thought that his affliction was not a liability, but an asset of great value. Despite the fact that all the philosophy I had examined clearly indicated that TVRY, adversity brings with it the seed of an I must confess that I had not the slightest idea how this affliction could ever become an asset. However, I continued my practice of wrapping that philosophy in bedtime stories, hoping the time would come when he would find some plan by which his handicap could be made to serve some useful purpose. Reason told me plainly that there was no adequate compensation for the lack of fears and natural hearing equipment. Desire backed by faith pushed reason aside and inspired me to carry on. As I analyzed the experience in retrospect, I can see now that my son's faith in me had much to do with the astounding results. He did not question anything I told him. I sold him the idea that he had a distinct advantage over his older brother, and that this advantage would reflect itself in many ways. For example, the teachers in school would observe that he had no ears, and, because of this, they would show him special attention and treat him with extraordinary kindness. They always did. His mother saw to that by visiting the teachers and arranging with them to give the child the extra attention necessary. I sold him the idea too, that when he became old enough to sell newspapers, his older brother had already become a newspaper merchant. He would have a big advantage over his brother, for the reason that people would pay him extra money for his, because they could see that he was a bright, industrious boy. Despite the fact he had no ears, we could notice that, gradually, the child's hearing was improving. Moreover, he had not the slightest tendency to be self-conscious because of his. When he was about 7, he showed the first evidence that our method of servicing his mind was bearing fruit. For several months he begged for the privilege of selling newspapers, but his mother would not give her She was afraid that his deafness made it unsafe for him to go on vestry alone. Finally, he took matters in his own hands. One afternoon, when he was left at home with the servants, he climbed through the kitchen window, Shinietto, the ground, and set out on his own. He borrowed 6 cents in capital from Benny Borhood shoemaker, invested it in papers, sold out, reinvested, and kept repeating until late in the evening. After balancing his accounts and paying back 6 cents he had borrowed from his banker, he had a net profit of 42 cents. When we got home that night, we found him in bed, asleep, with the money tightly clenched in his hand. Thank you so much for watching. Truly, the fact that you stayed until the end of this video says something important about you. It shows that you care, that you're hungry, that somewhere deep inside, you believe you're meant for more, and you're ready to take the small steps to get there. The slight edge isn't just a concept, it's a way of living. It's a quiet power that works in the background, shaping your future through the choices you make every single day. Most people ignore it. They think one small decision doesn't matter. But you're learning the truth, that every small decision matters, more than you can imagine. It's easy to overlook the power of reading just 1 page a day, walking for 10 minutes, saying no to junk food, putting your phone away and focusing, saving a single penny. But those tiny steps, the ones that seem so simple, even invisible, they build momentum, and momentum builds results. Greatness doesn't arrive in some grand moment. It's crafted in the quiet, in the routine, in the choices that no one else sees. And if you stick with those small steps, if you keep showing up when no one claps, if you keep believing when progress feels invisible, one day, the results will speak for themselves. So today, I want to leave you with a reminder. You don't need to change everything overnight. You just need to keep doing the small things right. Read that book. Say no to that distraction. Take that walk. Be kind to that person. Be patient with yourself. Every one of those actions is a brick, and together, they build the life you're dreaming of. If this video gave you even a little push of inspiration, then don't let it stop here. Like the video, subscribe for more content like this, and share it with someone you care about, someone who's maybe just one idea away from turning their life around. Your story is still being written, and the pen is in your hand. Thanks again for watching. Keep growing. keep believing, and never forget, your slight edge begins now.